What do the movies Psycho, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and The Silence of the Lambs all have in common? Besides being really good, intense thrillers, and I love scary movies, they were all inspired by a man known as the Butcher of Plainfield. Ed Gein was a murderer from Wisconsin who killed 2 women and robbed as many as 10 graves. His crimes came to light in 1957, and his disturbing actions shocked the nation. Hi, I'm Denise from Fascinating Cases. Today I want to go over the life and crimes of Ed Gein. Netflix will soon be releasing the 3rd installment of its hit series Monster. It will star Charlie Hunnam as Ed Gein. And I wanted to go over the case before the show aired and then after to compare the real life of Ed Gein with the Hollywood version. So when you think of Wisconsin killers, Jeffrey Dahmer probably comes to mind. But before him, there was Ed Gein. Ed Gein was born in August of 1906 near La Crosse, Wisconsin, and his family was very dysfunctional. Ed's father was abusive. He was an alcoholic who struggled to support his family. Ed's mother, Augusta, was a deeply religious, domineering woman who was clearly the head of the household. Ed had an older brother named Henry, and Augusta preached to her boys nonstop that drinking was evil and women were evil and sinful. All women except herself, of course. The family ran a small grocery store, but Augusta wasn't happy in La Crosse. The city was too big for her, too evil for her. Augusta wanted her boys to be isolated from the world, what she called a corrupt world. She moved the family to Plainfield, Wisconsin, a tiny town in central Wisconsin. And the family lived and worked on a small remote farm. The boys were allowed to go to school, but friendships were highly discouraged. Ed was shy and awkward, and he was bullied by classmates. He was said to laugh randomly and at inappropriate things, and he lacked good hygiene. Ed and Henry stopped going to school around the 7th or 8th grade. They spent all of their time working on the farm. When George Gein died in 1944 of heart failure due to alcoholism, Ed took odd jobs in and around Plainfield to help support his family. Ed never dated and was unusually close to his mother. But Henry wanted to spread his wings. He wanted to experience more of life. He wanted to date, drink with friends, and socialize. The brothers were, after all, in their 40s. And Henry believed Ed was too close and attached to their mother, and he told Ed so. Henry told Ed to break free of Augusta's hold, but Ed wanted no part of that. He even resented being told to distance himself. He wanted to stay with his mother forever. Then in May of 1944, Henry died mysteriously. The brothers were burning some brush when the fire spread uncontrollably. The two were separated, and when the fire was contained, Henry was found dead in an unburned area, supposedly of smoke inhalation. And though Ed told authorities he didn't know where Henry was, he led them right to his body. Henry's head had strange bruises on it, but no investigation took place. Whether or not Ed was involved was never looked into. And that left Ed with his mother alone, and Ed liked it that way. Then Augusta suffered 2 strokes, and Ed devoted all his time to caring for her, and his attachment to her deepened. She died in December of 1945, and Ed was devastated. He was on the farm alone, and he took her death very hard. He would go to her gravesite and will her to rise from the dead. He said he lost his only friend and true love and was now alone in the world. Ed boarded up his mother's room and left it untouched while Ed occupied some of the rest of the house, which soon became dilapidated and filthy. There was no electricity in the home. Ed continued to take odd jobs around town, including, strangely enough, babysitting.
When you paid him $1, you had $1.50 worth of work out of him. I mean, he didn't slack off. He wouldn't screw anything up. I think that everybody treated him, even though he was maybe a little, what you'd think, a little different. But Eddie was Eddie.
Ed liked to read, but his subject matter took a gruesome turn. He read about war experiments, cannibal tribes, and medical dissection. He started to fixate on women's body parts. He even desired to specifically become his mother. Despite hiring Ed for handyman work, he made women uncomfortable.
When you listen now, the women that would talk about it, they felt kind of funny when Ed would look at them. He would give off kind of a funny, it made him uncomfortable the way he would stare at them.
By the late 1940s and early 50s, Ed Gein really turned to the dark side. He began to read obituaries and go to cemeteries and dig up freshly buried bodies where the dirt would be loose. These were all women. I don't know how he ever got away with this. He targeted bodies that would most resemble his mother. He took the bodies home and dissected them, claiming he acted in a trance-like state. With the human remains, Ed would make face masks, skin-covered furniture, and lampshades, and bowls made from human skulls. Sometimes Ed would just dig up a body and take the head and leave the rest of the body in the grave. But soon grave robbing was not enough for Ed. When he couldn't get his hands on a suitable body, he turned to victims that were alive, that somewhat resembled his mother. Mary Hogan was a 51-year-old tavern owner that lived in Pine Grove, just a few miles from Plainfield. She was bold and rough around the edges. She swore like a sailor, the kind of woman Ed's mother warned him about, a woman opposite of Augusta Gein. Locals gossiped and said Ed did not like Mary. It was well known. Then on December 8th, 1954, Ed went to Mary's bar, and he was armed. And when it was quiet and no one was there, Ed shot Mary in the head, and he dragged her out of the bar and put her into his truck. He took her back to his farm and began butchering her. Mary was discovered missing when a customer came to an empty bar. There was blood on the floor and drag marks out the back door. The death was investigated, but it went cold for 3 years. Then, in November of 1957, Bernice Warden disappeared. Bernice was a 58-year-old widow who owned a small hardware store in Plainfield. She was popular in the community and friendly, and Ed would patronize the store, and the two would chat. On the morning of November 16th, 1957, Bernice opened the store as usual, and Ed arrived to buy some antifreeze. Witnesses say the two were talking, but no one ever saw Bernice alive again after that. Friends and neighbors became concerned when Bernice was not at her store. The doors were locked, and Bernice was nowhere to be found. Her son, who had just gotten back from deer hunting, went to the store to investigate. The place was a mess with blood on the floor. Police were called, and Bernice's son mentioned a frequent customer. It was 51-year-old Ed Gein. At the store, receipts from Ed were found. Police headed to his isolated farm to investigate. On the property, police discovered horror. Bernice Warden's body was hanging upside down in the shed on the property. She was beheaded and gutted. Inside the house, police found not only a decade's worth of trash, but also furniture and clothing made from human skin. They also found the head of Mary Hogan in a paper bag in the kitchen. She had been missing for 3 years. Police found bones and body parts all over Ed Gein's house. Ed Gein was arrested and put in a cell. He refused to talk at first, but when faced with the evidence and after eating a piece of apple pie, Ed opened up about everything. Police assumed many people were killed because of the volume of remains, but Ed said he only killed Mary and Bernice. The rest of the parts came from local cemeteries. The crimes of Ed Gein were uncovered, and the people were shell-shocked. Reporters from all over the nation descended on Plainview. Gein underwent a court-ordered psychological evaluation for 1 month, and Ed Gein's dysfunctional family life and his descent into madness came into light. His mother's control over him made him terrified of meaningful human contact. Left on his own, Ed was free to divulge in his twisted fantasies and take action in perverse ways. His madness led him to cemeteries for companionship. Ed would read obituaries, get details on recent burials when the ground was fresh and loose, and then go in the dark of the night to take the bodies. The discovery of Gein's depravities deepened as investigators investigated his home. He fashioned an apron-like cloak with straps that tied in the back of a woman's chest and upper torso and leggings made of women's skin. When Ed decided that the corpses weren't enough for him, he decided to spend time at Mary Hogan's bar. Mary was a dirty talker, and Ed saw a woman he could target. Ed even joked with townsfolk when residents would wonder where Mary went.
Somebody said, well, I wonder where Mary Hogan is. Well, he said, she's over by my place. He said, I got her over there. And everybody said, oh, yeah, Eddie, you got her. Yeah, we know Eddie, yeah.
At the end of 1957, Ed was charged with the murder of Bernice Worden, not of Mary Hogan because it would have been too expensive for the small county. In January of 1958, hearings took place to see if Ed Gein was sane enough to stand trial. Doctors who evaluated Ed said he was schizophrenic and delusional, and medical officials said it all came down to Augusta Gein, the effect she had on Ed's psyche, and his desire to replace her after she died. The judge ruled that Ed Gein was legally insane and not competent to stand trial. He was sent to a hospital for the criminally insane, first in Waupun, Wisconsin, then into Madison. Ed Gein's house, property, and what normal belongings he had were set to be auctioned off March 9th, 1958. But before that could happen, Gein's house was burned to the ground. Authorities couldn't tell if it was arson or not, but Plainfield residents didn't care. They were glad it was gone. Ed himself, upon learning about the fire, said, "It's just as well." Some of Ed's property was still auctioned off, and hordes of curiosity seekers went to his farm for a look, and his car was sold and then used as a sideshow attraction. Ed Gein was a model patient. He didn't talk much with others and read the paper and kept to himself. In 1968, Ed's doctor said he was now sane enough to stand trial for the murder of Bernice Worden. The judge found him guilty, but he said he was still too insane to go to prison. So Gein spent the rest of his days at that same psychiatric hospital. But now he was considered a guilty man who had time to think as he aged. On July 26, 1984, Ed Gein died of respiratory failure at the age of 77. He was buried next to his mother in Plainfield, right where he would want to be, I'm sure. Ed denied that his mother's body was one that he exhumed. He said he was unable to do it, and it was never checked out. An audio tape of Ed Gein was discovered in 2019. It was an interview conducted by investigators the day of his arrest. The tapes were featured in a 2023 docuseries called Psycho, The Lost Tapes of Ed Gein. Ed comes off as very calm and nonchalant when talking about his crimes.
Would you enjoy it while you were doing it? That's the worst part of it. I really didn't care. I knew better than I didn't, but the rest was... How many grams did you go? Well, and the... When you cut the body apart? Well, there's some I didn't even, never took home. That's right. Just opened up the casket and cut them apart there. That's right.
Whether or not Ed Gein was a cannibal is not known, and he has denied it. Either way, police found a human heart in a bag near the stove. Famous author Robert Bloch lived in Wisconsin for a few years and was familiar with Ed Gein's story. He thought it would make a good book, and he wrote a novel about it. And what was he famous for? Writing the novel called Psycho, about a man obsessed with his mother who turned out to be a murderer. The character Norman Bates was loosely based on Ed Gein.
Do you go out with friends?
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
Alfred Hitchcock brought the novel Psycho to the big screen in 1960. It's considered one of the greatest films of all time and set a new precedent for violence and deviant acts on screen. That shower scene is a doozy. People lined up around the block to see the movie. Then we have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which came out in 1974. Leatherface, the chainsaw-wielding maniac, is also based off Ed Gein. Some innocent young travelers come across a dysfunctional family, and they find themselves in a house of horrors with bones and body parts. Leatherface wears a mask made of human skin. Sounds a little bit like Ed Gein's thing. I personally like the remake with Jessica Biel. And finally, we have Silence of the Lambs, which came out in 1991. Hannibal Lecter helps FBI agent Clarice Starling hunt serial killer Buffalo Bill, who kills women and makes suits out of their skins, just like Ed Gein was doing. The horrible crimes of Ed Gein are in stark contrast to the idealistic life portrayed in the 1950s. That's what made it so shocking. How could something like this happen? And how could someone be capable of such acts? Ed Gein was. So we'll see how well Netflix handles the Ed Gein case. My guess is it's going to be extremely graphic and gruesome. Although nothing compared to the actual photos of Ed Gein's victims, which are out there on the internet for the world to see. The images we put in our minds, don't we? Are you planning on watching the original monster, Ed Gein, when it comes out? Let's talk about it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll get back to you. Like and subscribe, and I appreciate you watching, and I'll be talking to you again real soon. Take care.